Jake Morrison sat in the big white chair at the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. The room was huge, with tall glass walls that showed the purple sky outside. All around him, different alien species talked in their strange languages. Some looked like giant birds with colorful feathers. Others had blue skin and 3 eyes. A few had tentacles instead of arms. Jake looked normal compared to them. He was just a middle-aged human man with brown hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple blue suit that made him look like any businessman from Earth, but Jake was not just any businessman. He was the human ambassador to the galaxy, and he had secrets that could change everything. The bird-like alien named Veltar was talking again. Her voice sounded like singing bells when she spoke. "The humans are so wonderful," she said to the other council members. "They always help us solve our problems without fighting. They talk instead of shooting. They make peace instead of war." All the other aliens nodded their heads or moved their tentacles in agreement. The blue-skinned Kauvan leader made a deep, humming sound that meant he was happy. The rock-like Thalassians clicked their stone fingers together. Even the scary Draconis warriors, who looked like walking dragons, seemed to agree. Jake smiled and nodded politely. Behind him stood 2 other humans. Colonel Amy Rodriguez was a tall woman with short black hair and sharp eyes. She wore a green military uniform but no weapons that anyone could see. Next to her was Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker, a young man with blonde hair who always looked calm and relaxed. "Ambassador Morrison," said the Altarian leader, who looked like a giant blue lizard. "We have another problem between the mining companies on Sector 7. Can you help us again?" Jake stood up slowly. "Of course," he said in his quiet voice. "We will send a team to look at the problem. I'm sure we can find a way for everyone to be happy." The aliens all made their happy sounds again. They loved how humans always fixed problems without anyone getting hurt. For 30 years, humans had been the galaxy's peacekeepers. When 2 species started fighting over a planet, humans would come and talk to both sides until they agreed to share. When trade routes had problems, humans would find new ways for everyone to make money. When pirates attacked shipping lanes, humans would somehow make the pirates stop without firing a single shot. What the aliens did not know was that humans were not peaceful at all. They were just very good at waiting. After the meeting ended, Jake walked to his private office in the human embassy building. The office looked normal, with a wooden desk, some chairs, and pictures of Earth on the walls. But when Jake pressed a hidden button under his desk, the walls changed. They became screens showing maps of the entire galaxy. Red dots marked every major alien homeworld. Green dots showed where human ships were located. Blue dots indicated human agents working undercover. There were thousands of dots, and most of them were in very important places. Amy and Steve came into the office and sat down. Amy pulled out a small device that made sure no one could listen to their conversation. "Report," Jake said quietly. Amy spoke first. "The Corvan Empire is building new warships in their secret facility on Kepler Prime. They think we do not know about it, but Agent Patricia Williams has been working there as an engineer for 2 years. She says they will have 50 new battleships ready in 6 months. Steve nodded. "The Thalassian Federation is working on new shield technology. Agent Danny Cooper is part of their research team. He says the new shields are very strong, but they use a lot of power. If we attack the power stations first, the shields will not work." Jake looked at the galaxy map. "What about the Draconis Collective?" "Still expanding toward the Outer Rim," Amy said. "But Agent Kelly Adams is now a trusted advisor to their war chief. She has been slowly convincing them to attack the Xanthari pirates instead of peaceful colonies." Jake smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had been watching his prey for a long time. "Good. Everything is going according to plan." The plan had started 30 years ago, right after humans first met alien species. The aliens had been surprised that humans were so peaceful. They expected the new species to be aggressive and dangerous, like most newcomers to the galaxy. Instead, humans offered to help solve problems and keep peace. The aliens were happy to let humans do this work. Peacekeeping was boring and difficult. It was much easier to let someone else deal with problems while they focused on making money and building their empires. They never suspected that humans had a different reason for wanting to be peacekeepers. While other species built armies to protect their homeworlds, humans built something different. They built a network of spies, agents, and hidden weapons throughout the galaxy. Every human diplomat was also a spy. Every human trader was gathering information. Every human scientist was studying alien weaknesses. The humans who worked as peacekeepers were not just stopping fights. They were learning how every alien species thought, how they fought, and what scared them the most. When humans helped solve a trade dispute, they also learned about shipping routes and defense systems. When humans mediated a territorial conflict, they mapped every military base and weapon platform. Jake looked at a special red folder on his desk. Inside were detailed plans for defeating every major power in the galaxy. The folder was marked Operation Harvest Moon, and it had taken 30 years to complete? Sir, Steve said quietly, are you sure this is necessary? The aliens trust us. They think we are their friends. Jake turned to look at him. His tired eyes suddenly looked very cold. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Steve. There are threats out there that these peaceful species cannot imagine. When those threats come, and they will come, someone needs to be ready to protect everyone. But sir, Steve continued, we could just tell them the truth. We could work together to build defenses. Amy shook her head. You still do not understand, do you? The aliens are not like us. They think in straight lines. When they see a problem, they try to solve it with the first solution they think of. They build big armies and expensive weapons, but they never think about what their enemies might do next. Jake nodded. Humans think differently. We plan for every possibility. We prepare for threats that do not exist yet. We position ourselves so that when danger comes, we are ready to act immediately. He pointed to the galaxy map. Look at all those red dots. Every one represents a potential threat. The Corvan Empire could decide to conquer their neighbors. The Thalassian Federation could use their technology to build weapons of mass destruction. The Draconis Collective could start a war that spreads across the galaxy. And when one of those things happens, Amy added, the peaceful species will be helpless. They will call for help, and by then it will be too late to build defenses. But we will already be in position. Our agents will already know everything about the enemy. Our weapons will already be hidden in the right places. Steve still looked uncomfortable. It just feels wrong, lying to them for so long. Jake sat down at his desk and picked up a picture of Earth. Do you know why humans survived on Earth, Steve? It was not because we were the strongest or the fastest. It was because we were the smartest hunters. We learned to be patient. We learned to plan ahead. We learned to work together to bring down prey much bigger than ourselves. He put the picture down and looked at the galaxy map again. The galaxy is full of predators, Steve. Some of them just have not revealed themselves yet. When they do, the peaceful species will need protectors, and we will be ready. A soft beeping sound came from Jake's desk. He pressed a button and a message appeared on the screen. It was from Agent Lisa Shun, who commanded a human ship near the Outer Rim. The message was short. Unknown contacts detected in dark space. Large fleet approaching from Galactic Edge. Estimate arrival in 72 hours. Jake's face went very still. Amy and Steve both leaned forward to read the message. Sir, Amy said quietly, what are your orders? Jake looked at the message for a long moment. Then he reached for his communicator. For 30 years, humans had been patient. They had smiled and talked and kept peace while preparing for this moment. The hunt was about to begin. The attack came from the dark space beyond the galaxy's edge. Nobody saw it coming. The Zirithi swarm moved like a black cloud through space, their bioships looking like giant insects with razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. They did not send messages or demands. They simply attacked. The first to die were the Mintakan colonies on the Outer Rim. The Mintakans were peaceful people who looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin and large eyes. They had beautiful cities made of crystal and light. They spent their time creating art and music and never hurt anyone. The Zirathi ships fell from the sky like meteors. But these meteors were alive and hungry. They landed in the crystal cities and began to eat everything. The bioships opened their mouths and consumed buildings, vehicles, and people. Within hours, the beautiful cities were gone. Within days, 3 entire worlds were silent and empty. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was chaos. Species from across the galaxy filled the great chamber, all talking at once in their different languages. The sounds mixed together into a terrible noise of fear and anger. "How many ships do they have?" asked the Corvan Emperor, his blue skin pale with worry. "Our scouts report at least 500 bioships," said the Thalassian Prime Minister, her 3 eyes blinking rapidly. "But they keep coming? More arrive every hour?" The Altarian leader stood up, his lizard-like body shaking. "We need to combine our fleets. We need to fight them together." "With what?" snapped the Draconis war chief, his dragon-like face twisted with frustration. "My ships are spread across 50 systems. The Corvan fleet is busy protecting their trade routes. The Thalassians have most of their ships in dock for repairs." More aliens spoke up, each one explaining why their military was not ready for a big fight. The Xanthari have fast ships but no heavy weapons. The Vorthan had strong shields but slow engines. The Nexari had good soldiers but old spacecraft. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat quietly in his chair, watching the aliens panic. Next to him, Colonel Amy Rodriguez and Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker looked calm and relaxed. They did not look worried at all. "We need the humans to negotiate," said the Altarian leader suddenly. "They can talk to these Zirathi, they can find a peaceful solution, they always do." All the aliens turned to look at Jake. Their faces showed hope and desperation. For 30 years, humans had solved every problem with words instead of weapons. Surely they could do it again. Jake stood up slowly. His face was serious and sad. "I am afraid negotiation is not possible this time," he said. In his quiet voice, "The Zirathi do not communicate. They do not want territory or resources. They only want to consume everything living." The chamber fell silent. The aliens stared at Jake with growing fear. "How do you know this?" asked the Corvan Emperor. Jake looked around the room at all the scared faces. "Because we have been watching them for 5 years. We detected their approach. Long before they reached the galaxy, we have studied their behavior and their biology. They are not like us. They are not even like the most aggressive species in this room. They are a plague that consumes everything in their path." The aliens gasped and whispered to each other. The humans had known about the Zirathi for 5 years, but had not warned anyone. "Why did you not tell us?" demanded the Thalassian Prime Minister. Jake's expression did not change. "Because you would have panicked, just like you are panicking now. You would have demanded that we help you build defenses, but your defenses would not have worked. The Zirathi are too strong and too many. Then what can we do?" asked the Draconis war chief. Jake paused for a long moment. Then he reached for his communicator. "The time for peace has ended," he said quietly. "Now we must fight." He pressed a button on his communicator and spoke clearly. "This is Terran. Command authorization Morrison Alpha 7. Execute Operation Harvest Moon. All human assets are weapons-free." "Repeat, weapons-free?" The aliens looked confused. They did not understand what Jake had just done. But across the galaxy, humans who had been hiding their true nature for 30 years suddenly stopped pretending. On the trade route between Corvan space and the Centauri colonies, a human cargo ship called the Peaceful Trader was carrying grain and medical supplies. Captain Roy Davis had been running cargo for 12 years. The aliens thought he was just another merchant trying to make an honest living, but when Roy received Jake's message, he smiled for the first time in months. He walked to the cargo bay and pressed a hidden control panel. The walls of the cargo bay slid apart, revealing rows of advanced fighter ships. The grain containers opened to show missile launchers and plasma cannons. The medical supplies were actually ammunition and spare parts. "This is Captain Davis to all fighters," Roy said into his headset. "Launch in 60 seconds. Primary target. Is the Zirathi fleet heading for the Corvan homeworld?" Show them what humans really are? 24 fighter ships launched from the Peaceful Trader. They were small and fast, with weapons that could punch through the armor of any alien warship. The Zirathi bioships were big and strong, but they were not ready for human fighters that moved like angry wasps. On the diplomatic station at Kepler 442, cultural attaché Helen Brooks was teaching alien children about human art and music. She had been doing this job for 8 years, and the alien families loved her. She seemed so kind and gentle, always smiling and patient with the children, but when Helen received the message, she calmly dismissed the children and locked her classroom door. She walked to her desk and began taking apart what looked like decorative sculptures and paintings. Each piece was actually a component of a high-tech military device. Within 10 minutes, Helen had assembled a powerful transmitter that could hack into any computer system. She connected it to the station's main network and began downloading classified information about every alien military installation in the sector. "Sorry, kids," Helen said to herself as she worked. "Art class is over. Time for war." At the same time, on the peaceful research station orbiting the Thalassian homeworld, Dr. Karen Mitchell was supposed to be studying ocean currents and weather patterns. She had been doing this boring job for 5 years, and the Thalassians thought she was just another curious human scientist. But Dr. Mitchell was not studying the weather. She was mapping the planet's defenses and identifying weak points in their shield generators. When she received Jake's message, she activated equipment that had been hidden in her research instruments. The weather monitoring devices were actually weapon guidance systems. The ocean current sensors were targeting computers for orbital bombardment platforms. The atmospheric analysis tools were communication relays for a hidden human fleet. "This is Dr. Mitchell to Sword Base," she said into her hidden communicator. "Target coordinates uploaded. The Thalassian homeworld is ready for protection. Begin deployment of defensive systems." Far above the planet, what looked like space debris began to move. Pieces of rock and metal that had been floating in orbit for years suddenly came alive. They were human weapon platforms, disguised as junk and forgotten satellites. They had been waiting patiently for this moment. Back on Nexus Prime, the alien council members watched Jake with growing horror. They were beginning to understand that humans had been lying to them for 30 years. "You have been preparing for war this whole time," said the Corvan Emperor, his voice shaking with anger and fear. "We have been preparing to protect the galaxy," Jake replied calmly. "The Zirathi are not the only threat out there. There are others, and they will come eventually. When they do, the peaceful species of this galaxy will need defenders." "You mean you will need slaves?" snapped the Draconis war chief. Jake looked at him with cold eyes. "No, we need allies. But first, we need to make sure there is still a galaxy left to protect." Reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships that had been disguised as traders and researchers were revealing their true nature. Weapons that had been hidden for decades were coming online. Human agents who had been trusted friends were taking control of critical systems. The Zirathi had brought terror to the galaxy, but they had also awakened something much more dangerous. They had forced humanity to drop its mask and show its true face. The aliens in the council chamber realized that they had been living next to the galaxy's most dangerous predators for 30 years. The humans had been watching them, studying them, and positioning themselves to control everything. And now the hunt was about to begin. The Zirathi fleet heading for the Altarian homeworld was massive. 12 bioships, each one the size of a small city, dropped out of hyperspace like hungry monsters. Their red eyes glowed in the darkness of space, and their claws reached out toward the blue-green planet below. The Altarians were ready to die. Their small defense fleet had only 8 ships, and they were old and weak compared to the Zirathi bioships. The planet's shields could maybe hold for a few hours, but then the monsters would land and begin eating everything. But the Zirathi fleet never reached the planet. Captain Nick Turner had been selling mining equipment to the Altarians for 2 years. His ship, the Wanderer, looked like any other merchant vessel. It was big and slow, with cargo containers attached to its hull like metal boxes. The Altarians had bought hundreds of mining tools from Nick, and they thought he was just a friendly trader who gave them good prices. Nick had been very helpful. He had mapped every asteroid in the system to find the best mining spots. He had studied the planet's defenses to make sure his cargo ships could land safely. He had even helped the Altarians improve their communication systems so they could coordinate their mining operations better. What the Altarians did not know was that Nick had been preparing the entire star system for war. When the Zirathi bioships appeared, Nick was ready. He pressed a button on his control panel, and the Wanderer suddenly changed. The cargo containers exploded outward, but instead of mining equipment, they revealed weapon platforms. Hidden missile launchers emerged from what looked like storage tanks. The ship's hull opened up to show plasma, cannons and railguns, but that was not the real surprise. All around the Zirathi fleet, the asteroid field came alive. Rocks that had been floating in space for millions of years suddenly started moving. They were not rocks at all. They were human weapon platforms, disguised to look like asteroids. Nick had been building them for 2 years, one piece at a time, hidden inside his mining equipment deliveries. The Zirathi bioships found themselves surrounded by hundreds of hidden weapons. They tried to turn and run, but it was too late. The trap was perfect. "This is Captain Turner to all weapon platforms," Nick said calmly into his communicator. "Target the big ugly bugs. Fire at will." The space around the Altarian homeworld lit up like a fireworks show. Missiles streaked through the darkness, leaving trails of white light. Plasma beams cut through the void like swords made of fire. Railgun rounds moved so fast they were invisible until they hit their targets. The Zirathi bioships were tough, but they were not ready for this kind of coordinated attack. Their armor cracked under the missile impacts. Their claws were cut off by plasma beams. Their red eyes went dark as railgun rounds punched through their hulls. Within 30 minutes, all 12 bioships were dead and drifting in space like broken toys. The Altarian homeworld was safe, and the Altarians could not believe what they had just seen. Similar battles were happening all across the galaxy. Every human who had been pretending to be a peaceful trader or researcher was revealing their true nature. The galaxy was discovering that it had been living with wolves in sheep's clothing for 30 years on the Thalassian homeworld. Dr. Karen Mitchell was no longer studying ocean currents. She was standing in an underwater command center that she had been building for 5 years. The Thalassians had thought she was just taking water samples and measuring temperatures. They had no idea she was constructing a massive weapons platform under their ocean. "Zirathi bioships incoming," reported her assistant, Lieutenant Brad Johnson, who had been posing as a marine biologist. 24 contacts, 15 minutes. Karen looked at the displays around her. The underwater facility was amazing. It had enough firepower to destroy a small moon, and it was completely hidden from any sensors. The Thalassians thought. Their homeworld was protected by orbital defense stations, but those were just for show. The real protection was down here, under the waves. "Activate the hydro cannons," Karen ordered. "Target the lead bioships. Let's show these bugs what humans can really do." The ocean around the Thalassian homeworld began to boil. Massive weapons emerged from the seafloor, rising up like metal mountains. They had been disguised as underwater research stations, but now they revealed their true purpose. The hydrocannons could fire water at incredible speeds, fast enough to punch through the armor of any spaceship. The Zirathi bioships never knew what hit them. They were expecting to fight orbital defense platforms, not weapons that shot up from the ocean. The hydrocannons tore through their formations, like a hurricane tearing through paper houses. But the biggest surprise was happening on the Corvan homeworld. Ambassador Tony Clark had been living in the human embassy for 8 years. The Corvans respected him and trusted him. He had helped them solve many problems and had always been fair and honest in his dealings with them. His embassy was in the heart of their capital city, surrounded by government buildings and important businesses. The Corvans thought the human embassy was just a normal diplomatic building. It had offices for meetings, living quarters for the human staff, and a beautiful garden where Tony liked to walk in the evenings. There was even a cultural center where humans and Corvans could learn about each other's societies. But when the Zirathi attack began, Tony showed the Corvans what the embassy really was. The beautiful garden was actually a launch pad for surface-to-space missiles. The cultural center was a command bunker with armor thicker than a battleship's hull. The Peace Monument in the courtyard was a planetary defense cannon that could destroy anything in orbit. "This is Ambassador Clark to Corvan Defense Command," Tony said into his communicator. "I'm taking control of your planetary defense grid. Do not interfere, and your people will be safe." The Corvan Emperor was furious. "You cannot do this. This is our world." Tony looked at him with sad eyes. "Your Majesty, 12 Zirathi bioships are heading for your planet. Your defense fleet has 6 ships, and they are no match for the enemy. Your orbital weapons are outdated and will not penetrate Zirathi armor. If you try to fight them alone, your people will die." The Emperor wanted to argue, but he could see the truth in Tony's words. His military advisors had already told him that they could not win against the Zirathi. "What do you want from us?" the Emperor asked. "Just stay out of our way," Tony replied. "We will protect your world, but we will do it our way." The human embassy suddenly began to change. The walls opened up to reveal missile silos and weapon emplacements. The roof retracted to show a massive cannon that pointed toward the sky. The peaceful garden became a fortress that could level half the city if necessary, but Tony was not planning to attack the Corvans. He was planning to save them. When the Zirathi bioships dropped out of hyperspace, they found themselves facing something they had never seen before. The Corvan homeworld was not just defended by a few old warships. It was defended by a fortress built by the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The bioships tried to land on the planet's surface, but they could not get through the defensive fire. Tony's weapons were too accurate and too powerful. Every shot hit its target. Every missile found its mark. The Zirathi had conquered dozens of star systems by overwhelming their enemies with numbers and biological weapons. But they had never faced an enemy that was smarter than they were. They had never fought humans. All across the galaxy, the same story was repeating. Human merchants were revealing hidden weapons. Human scientists were activating secret military installations. Human diplomats were taking control of alien defense systems. The galaxy was learning a terrible truth about humanity. For 30 years, humans had been the perfect guests. They had been helpful and friendly and peaceful. They had solved problems and kept peace and never asked for anything in return, but they had been lying the entire time. Every human in the galaxy had been a spy. Every human ship had been a weapon. Every human facility had been a military installation. The species that everyone thought was the most peaceful in the galaxy was actually the most dangerous. The Zirathi had awakened a sleeping giant, and now they were learning what happened to those who threatened the things humans had decided to protect. The revelation was spreading through the galaxy like wildfire. Humans were not peacekeepers. They were apex predators who had been hiding in plain sight for 3 decades, and they were very, very good at hunting. The Zirathi hive mind was confused. For millions of years, they had swept across the dark spaces between galaxies, consuming everything in their path. They were like a plague of giant insects that ate planets and turned entire star systems into empty graves. Nothing had ever stopped them before, but these humans were different. The Zirathi could not understand why their usual tactics were not working. They had brought thousands of bioships to overwhelm the galaxy's defenses. They had attacked multiple targets at the same time to spread the enemy forces thin. They had used their superior numbers to crush any resistance, yet everywhere they went, the humans were already waiting for them. General Pete Williams commanded the human response from his flagship, the UES Retribution. For 10 years, the ship had been disguised as a deep space research vessel studying black holes and cosmic radiation. The aliens who saw it thought it was just another boring science ship with a crew of peaceful researchers, but the Retribution was actually a battleship more powerful than anything else in the galaxy. Its hull was made of metal so strong that it could survive flying through a star. Its weapons could destroy entire fleets. Its computers could track 1,000 targets. at once and hit them all perfectly. Pete stood on the bridge, looking at the displays that showed Zirathi movements across the galaxy. His hair was gray and his face was covered with scars from old battles that the aliens knew nothing about. He had been fighting wars in the dark spaces beyond the galaxy for 15 years, preparing for this exact moment. "Sir," said Commander Angela Foster, his tactical officer, "the Zirathi are massing their forces near the Vega system. It looks like they are planning a major assault on the inner colonies." Pete smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had cornered his prey. "Perfect. That is exactly what we want them to do." The truth was that humans had been studying the Zirathi for much longer than 5 years. They had been tracking the swarm for decades, watching them consume other galaxies and learning their patterns. Humans knew how the Zirathi thought, how they moved, and most importantly, how they could be defeated. The Zirathi were like army ants. They were very good at overwhelming small groups of enemies, but they were not good at adapting to new situations. They followed the same attack patterns over and over again. Once humans figured out those patterns, the Zirathi became predictable. "All ships, this is General Williams," Pete said into his communicator. "Begin Phase 2 of Operation Harvest Moon. Drive the bugs toward the Vega system. Make them think they are winning." Across the galaxy, human forces began what looked like a retreat. Ships that had been fighting the Zirathi suddenly pulled back. Weapons platforms that had been defending planets went silent. Space stations that had been coordinating resistance stopped responding to calls for help, the aliens watching. The battles were terrified. It looked like the humans were losing. It looked like the Zirathi were too strong even for the galaxy's secret protectors, but the humans were not retreating. They were hurting. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Adams led one of the most important parts of the plan. She and her team had been living on a dead planet called Omega-7 for 3 years. The planet was in the path that the Zirathi would take to reach the inner colonies. It had no cities, no resources, and no strategic value. At least. That is what everyone thought. Dev had been posing as an archaeological team leader, studying the ruins of an ancient civilization. Her team of 20 humans spent their days digging through old buildings and cataloging broken pottery. The few aliens who visited the planet thought they were just curious scientists trying to learn about the past, but Beth and her team were not archaeologists. They were soldiers from the human special forces, and they had been turning Omega-7 into the galaxy's deadliest trap. "Contact!" shouted Sergeant Carl Roberts from his hidden position in the ruins. "Zirathi bioships dropping out of hyperspace. Count is 47 vessels." Beth looked through her binoculars at the sky above. The Zirathi bioships were huge and terrifying, like flying mountains covered with claws and teeth. They were coming down to consume whatever resources the planet might have. "All teams, this is Adams," Beth said into her radio. "The bugs have taken the bait. Execute Omega Protocol." What happened next would have seemed impossible to anyone watching. The dead planet suddenly came alive with hidden weapons. The ancient ruins that Beth's team had been studying were actually camouflaged gun emplacements. The archaeological dig sites were missile silos. The research camp was a command center with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. Beth and her team had spent 3 years preparing this trap. Every piece of equipment they had brought to the planet had been a weapon in disguise. Every day of archaeological work had been spent building defensive positions and setting up ambush points. The Zirathi bioships landed on the planet expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they found themselves caught in a killing field that had been prepared specifically for them. "Fire!" Beth shouted. The planet erupted in light and sound. Missiles streaked up from hidden launchers, hitting the bioships before they could react. Plasma cannons emerged from fake archaeological equipment, cutting through Zirathi armor like knives through paper. Rail guns that had been disguised as survey equipment fired rounds that could punch through solid rock. But the real surprise was underground. Beth's team had been digging tunnels for 3 years, not to study ancient ruins, but to plant explosives under every landing zone on the planet. When the Zirathi bioships touched down, The ground beneath them exploded. Within an hour, all 47 bioships were destroyed. Omega-7 looked like a graveyard of giant metal insects. Beth and her team had not lost a single person. "This is Adams to command," Beth reported. "Omega-7 is secure." The bugs fell for it completely. General Williams received the report on his flagship with satisfaction. The trap was working perfectly. The Zirathi were being funneled exactly where humans wanted them to go, but the most important part of the plan was happening far from the battles. While the galaxy's attention was focused on the fighting, human strike teams were moving toward the real target. Commander Don Roberts had been running a monitoring station in the dark space beyond the galaxy's edge for 7 years. The aliens thought he was tracking cosmic radiation and watching for dangerous asteroids. His small crew of 15 humans seemed harmless and boring, but Dan was not monitoring space radiation. He was tracking Zirathi communication signals. For 7 years, he had been listening to the hive mind's commands and mapping their home systems. While the aliens focused on the attacking fleets, Dan had been finding the source. "We have a lock on the primary hive cluster," reported Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had been posing as an astrophysicist. 3 systems, 47 bioworlds, estimated population in the trillions, Don nodded. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The Zirathi attacking the galaxy were just a small part of the swarm. The real threat was the hive mind itself, the central intelligence that controlled billions of bioships across multiple galaxies. "Signal the stealth fleet," Dunn ordered. "It is time to cut off the head of the snake." Hidden in the dark space between stars, a fleet of human ships began moving toward the Zirathi home systems. These ships were completely invisible to any sensors. They had been waiting in the void for years, supplied by secret cargo runs that the aliens knew nothing about. The ships were not large, but they carried the most dangerous weapons humanity had ever built. Weapons that could destroy entire planets. Weapons that could turn stars into bombs. Weapons that could kill a hive mind that had lived for millions of years. Captain Laverne Martinez commanded the lead ship in the stealth fleet. She had been waiting in the dark for 5 years, watching and planning. Now it was time to strike. "All ships, this is Martinez," she said into her communicator. "Begin final approach to target systems. Remember, we get one chance at this. Make it count." The Zirathi hive mind had no idea what was coming. They were focused on the battles in the galaxy, trying to understand why their attacks were failing. They did not know that their executioners were already at their door. The hunt was about to end, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened to species that threatened the things humans had decided to protect. The final battle did not happen with massive fleets shooting at each other in space. It happened quietly, in the dark systems where the Zirathi hive mind had been hiding for millions of years. Commander Frank Taylor led 12 small human ships through the void between stars, moving like ghosts toward their target. Frank had been preparing for this mission his entire career. He was a tall man with cold blue eyes and hands that never shook, even in the most dangerous situations. For 8 years, he had been studying the Zirathi home systems, learning every detail about their defenses and the location of their central intelligence. "Approaching target zone," reported Lieutenant Susan Hayes from the navigation station. "Zirathi bioworlds detected. 3 systems, just like the intelligence report said." Frank looked at the displays showing the enemy home systems. The Zirathi had built their civilization around massive living planets that pulsed with organic energy. These bioworlds were like giant brains connected by streams of living tissue that stretched across space. The central hive mind lived in the largest bioworld, controlling billions of Zirathi across multiple galaxies. "Begin surgical strike," Frank ordered. "Target the neural networks first. Cut the connections between the bioworlds." The human ships fired weapons that were unlike anything else in the galaxy. These were not normal missiles or energy beams. They were weapons designed specifically to kill living planets. The projectiles burrowed deep into the bioworlds and released viruses that attacked the organic computer systems. Within minutes, the connections between the Zirathi home systems began to fail. The streams of living tissue that carried commands from the central hive mind started to wither and die. The massive bio-worlds that had controlled the swarm for millions of years suddenly found themselves alone and confused. Neural networks are down, reported Dr. Patricia Young from her position at the science station. The hive mind is isolated. Beginning final phase. Frank nodded and activated the most powerful weapon on his ship. It was a device that could destroy the quantum structures that held living organisms together. When it hit the central bio-world, the entire Zirathi civilization would simply stop existing. Fire, Frank said quietly. The weapon hit the largest bio-world like a silent thunderbolt. There was no explosion, no flash of light. The living planet simply began to dissolve, breaking apart at the molecular level. The hive mind that had controlled the Zirathi for eons died without making a sound. Across the galaxy, every Zirathi bioship suddenly stopped moving. The massive creatures that had been terrorizing peaceful worlds became empty shells drifting through space. The swarm that had consumed entire galaxies was dead, killed by a handful of humans who had struck at exactly the right moment. The war was over. But for the galaxy, a new and more terrifying age was just beginning. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council met again in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. But everything was different now. The aliens who filled the seats looked nervous and scared. They whispered to each other in worried voices and kept glancing at the human delegation. Admiral Grace Thompson sat where Ambassador Jake Morrison used to sit. She was a stern woman with gray hair and scars on her hands from battles that most aliens could not imagine. Behind her stood a full honor guard of human soldiers wearing advanced armor and carrying weapons that could level city blocks. The Zirathi threat has been eliminated, Grace announced to the assembled delegates. Every bioship has been destroyed. Their home systems have been sterilized. The swarm will never threaten anyone again. The aliens should have been happy, but they were not. They had seen what humans were really capable of. They had watched a species they thought was peaceful and weak destroy an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Now, they were wondering if they had simply traded one threat for another. However, Grace continued, our analysis has revealed several other potential threats to galactic stability. She activated a holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red zones appeared around different star systems, marking areas that humans considered dangerous. The Corvan Empire has been building secret weapons for the past 5 years. The Thalassian Federation has been developing technology that could be used to create super weapons. The Draconis Collective has been expanding their territory without permission from the Council. The Xanthari pirates have been raiding shipping lanes with military-grade equipment. Each species that Grace mentioned looked uncomfortable. They realized that humans had been watching them just as closely as they had been watching the Zirathi. We propose a new galactic security arrangement, Grace said. Humanity will assume responsibility for maintaining peace and stability throughout the galaxy. This will require our forces to maintain a permanent presence in every major system. The Kovan Emperor stood up, his blue face flushed with anger. You cannot just take control of our worlds. We are sovereign species with the right to govern ourselves. Grace looked at him with the same cold expression that Jake Morrison had, perfected over 30 years of pretending to be a diplomat. Your Majesty, you are certainly free to govern your own people, but galactic security is now a human responsibility. We have proven that we are the only species capable of protecting everyone from existential threats. What if we refuse? Asked the Thalassian Prime Minister. Grace smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. Then you will share the fate of the Zirathi. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what Grace was really saying. The humans had just demonstrated that they could completely destroy a civilization that had conquered multiple galaxies. Any species that opposed them would simply cease to exist. Of course, Grace continued in a more pleasant tone, we do not expect any problems. Humanity has always been committed to peace and prosperity for all species. We simply want to make sure that peace is maintained. Ambassador Jake Morrison, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the human delegation, stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. He looked exactly the same as he had 30 years ago when humans first joined the Galactic Council. He still wore simple clothes and smiled politely at everyone. "My friends," Jake said in his gentle voice, "I know this is a difficult transition. But please remember that humans have always been your protectors. We have prevented countless wars and solved thousands of disputes. The only thing that has changed is that we are no longer pretending to be weak." The Altarian leader raised one of his scaled hands. "What about our sovereignty? What about our right to make our own decisions?" Jake nodded understanding. "You will continue to govern your own worlds and make your own laws. But any decision that affects galactic security will need human approval. Any military development will need human oversight. Any territorial expansion will need human permission." "That is not sovereignty," protested the Draconis war chief. "That is slavery with extra steps." Jake's smile did not change, but his eyes became very cold. "I prefer to think of it as guided evolution. The galaxy has been chaotic and dangerous for too long. Too many species have been allowed to develop weapons they cannot control. Too many conflicts have been allowed to escalate into wars. Too many threats have been ignored until they became existential crises." He gestured to the empty seats where the Zerathi delegation would have sat if they still existed. "Humanity prevented the complete destruction of galactic civilization. We did this by being smarter, more patient, and more prepared than anyone else. We earned the right to lead through superior performance." Captain Chris Nelson of the UES Sovereign received orders to take his ship to the Corvan homeworld. His ship was no longer disguised as a merchant vessel. It now flew openly as a human dreadnought, with weapons visible on its hull and armor that gleamed like a threat in the starlight. Chris looked out at the stars from his command bridge and thought about how much had changed. For 8 years he had pretended to be a peaceful trader carrying cargo between worlds. He had smiled at alien customs officials and followed their silly regulations. He had been patient and polite even when they treated him like a harmless fool. But those days were over. Now his ship flew through space like an apex predator marking its territory. Alien vessels moved out of his way without being asked. Space stations requested permission before he approached. Planetary governments sent messages of welcome and cooperation before he even entered their systems. The galaxy had learned to fear and respect humanity. The species that had seemed so peaceful and weak had revealed themselves to be the most dangerous predators in known space. They had waited 30 years for the perfect moment to show their true nature, and when that moment came, they had struck with overwhelming force and perfect precision. "Sir," said his communications officer, "we are receiving surrender broadcasts from 12 different pirate groups in this sector. They are requesting permission to turn themselves in to human authorities." Chris smiled. Even the criminals were smart enough to understand the new reality. Humanity now controlled the galaxy, and resistance was futile. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human dominance had begun. And somewhere in the dark spaces between the stars, other predators looked toward the galaxy and decided that it was time to find easier prey elsewhere. The galaxy was at peace. But it was the peace of the conquered,